Hey there, just a heads up, this story's got some intense stuff, so it's just for learning and fun, okay? This is exactly what went down in court on day 12 of Sean Diddy Combs' trial, straight from Inner City Press. Everyone thought day 12 was gonna be super boring, just a bunch of papers and legal mumbo jumbo. But then, whoa, Eddie Murphy sneaked into the courtroom through a side door. Reporters bolted upright, the jury leaned in like they were watching a movie, and Diddy, he just froze like a statue. Nobody had a clue Eddie was gonna show up. Not the news people, not even most of the lawyers in the room. And when he started talking, oh man, what he said sent shockwaves everywhere, way beyond that courtroom. Eddie kicked things off, saying, "I've kept my mouth shut for years, but after what I saw, I had to ditch Hollywood, and I've been carrying that heavy secret ever since." He sat tall in the witness chair, his suit all crisp and sharp, looking super calm, like he had everything under control. But his eyes, oh, they told a different story. They looked like they'd seen some seriously dark stuff, way older than Hollywood itself. When the judge asked him to say his name for the record, he just said it plain and simple, then glanced over at Diddy, who was sitting there, not moving a muscle. Eddie fixed the mic, leaned in, and dropped a bombshell nobody saw coming. "I left Hollywood because I saw too much, and I couldn't unsee it." He didn't shout or anything. He didn't need to. The whole courtroom leaned closer, hanging on his every word. Eddie started his story way back in 2006 when he was riding high. His career was popping off again. Tons of movie offers, shiny new studio deals, and people whispering about awards. "I had so much work," he said. "My phone was ringing like crazy every single day, like I was a hot new star in my 20s again." Then, one night he got a quiet call from a big-time producer. The guy invited him to a super secret party at a fancy house in the Hollywood Hills. It wasn't on any calendar, just one of those hush-hush gatherings where big shots make deals and careers get a huge boost. Eddie was curious but played it cautious. Like always, he'd heard whispers about these parties Diddy threw where they took your phone, banned cameras, and told you to just enjoy the vibe. "I figured it'd be music, drinks, people laughing and showing off," Eddie said. "But when I pulled up to that place, I knew right away something was off, like a bad feeling in my gut." He rolled up to this massive mansion, all gated up with an iron entrance that only opened after a fancy fingerprint scan. Guys in matching black suits were waiting at the curb, super serious. They grabbed his phone and handed him a little card that said, "Only one rule tonight, be who you really are." It sounded cool, but it gave him chills. Inside, the vibe wasn't fun or lively. It was straight up creepy. No loud music blasting, no big groups chatting and laughing, just quiet murmurs and people staring at each other. It was silent like a church, Eddie said, but not the holy kind, more like a haunted, spooky one. He walked into the main lounge and looked around. He spotted actors he'd known forever, some he'd worked with, and others who never showed up to parties like this. There were athletes, big company bosses, and everyone was acting so weird. Not drunk, not wild, just super careful, like they knew someone was watching their every move. Then, a woman in tall heels and a guy in a fancy robe walked past him, heading silently down a side hallway. That's when it clicked, Eddie told the court. This wasn't about partying. This was about who had the power. The lawyer asked Eddie why he didn't just leave right then, even though he felt something was wrong. Eddie said, "I had to figure it out. I needed to see it with my own eyes. And man, I wish I hadn't." After wandering around a bit, feeling uneasy, Diddy himself came up to him out of nowhere. He acted like they were old pals, throwing his arm around Eddie's shoulder and saying, "Brother, it's about time you came home." Eddie gave a little smile, remembering it, but it faded fast. He didn't mean Hollywood, Eddie said. He meant this weird world he was running. Diddy seemed calm, super confident, but there was a coldness in his eyes, like he was hiding something dark. He walked Eddie through the huge house, acting proud, not of the fancy art or the big rooms, but of what was happening inside them. As they walked, Diddy pointed at different people and whispered stuff like, "That guy just got a $200 million movie approved," or "That one, he does whatever I say now." But the creepiest moment came when Diddy stopped in front of a big, heavy wooden door. He looked Eddie right in the eyes and said, "This is where the real choices get made. You want to stay funny and broke, or you want to level up?" Eddie tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe it was some weird Hollywood joke, but Diddy didn't laugh. He just stared, waiting for Eddie to say something. That's when Eddie noticed a camera tripod inside the room, just barely visible through a crack in the door. It wasn't hidden, it was right there, out in the open. "I saw people go in that room looking nervous," Eddie said. "When they came out, they were either grinning like they won something huge or looking totally empty, like they'd lost a piece of themselves." Eddie didn't go in that room. He stepped back, pretending he needed a drink to get out of there. there. Diddy just smiled and said, "No rush. We're all family here." Then he walked off down a hallway. That was the first big warning sign, Eddie said, like a line he couldn't cross. It stopped feeling like a party and started feeling like a test to join something scary, he said. He went outside to clear his head, needing a moment to breathe, but a woman at the exit stopped him, all smooth and polite. "You're not done yet, are you?" she asked, handing him a drink. Nobody leaves before the experience. That word, experience, kept echoing in his head, making him feel uneasy. Eddie went back to the main lounge, and what he saw next proved all his fears were real. Eddie kept his voice steady even though it was hard, as he told the court about a moment he'd never shake. "They took a group of us into a back room," he said. "The lights were super dim, no music at all, just thick velvet curtains, flickering candles, and a long table with shiny silver trays on it. He was ushered in with a bunch of A-list celebrities, including a rising action star he didn't want to name at first. But when the lawyer pressed him, he admitted it was Dwayne Johnson. The room got so quiet you could feel it. Diddy stood at the head of the table, smiling like he was putting on a show. "Tonight's about how far you'll go," Diddy said to everyone. "Greatness doesn't come free. You want to run Hollywood? Prove it." A polished silver tray was placed in front of Dwayne, and a guy wearing gloves lifted the lid. Underneath, raw monkey brains, still pink, still steaming, like something out of a horror movie. Some people in the room laughed nervously, others turned away, not wanting to look. Diddy said, "Come on, Rock, eat that and the big roll is yours." Eddie's voice shook just a tiny bit as he told what happened next. Dwayne hesitated, looked around at everyone, then he ate it, just swallowed and kept going like it was nothing. Diddy clapped, acting like a proud dad. "That's what I'm talking about," he said, then looked down the line at the other guests. "Who's next?" Eddie said he froze, his stomach turning. "I felt so sick," he said. "I looked for the door, but then Diddy walked right up to me." Diddy stared him down and said, "You ready, preacher boy?" Eddie stood his ground and said, "I didn't come here for this." Diddy leaned in close and whispered, "Then why are you here?" The whole courtroom was dead silent as Eddie told this part. He said he walked out of that room, not running, but moving with purpose. "I wasn't scared they'd hurt me," he said. "I was scared of what they could do to other people." As he left, Diddy shouted after him, "You'll be back when you're ready to really make it." But Eddie never went back, and after that night, he never worked in Hollywood the same way again. "I told Diddy I'm a man of God," Eddie said slowly, sitting up straighter in the witness chair, "and I meant every word. I told him I wasn't gonna eat anything, sign anything, or lose my soul just to fit in with whatever that was." He stopped for a second, looking right at the jury. That's when Diddy made it clear, if you don't play the game plays you. Eddie said after he said no to Diddy's creepy offer, he became a target, not with fists or anything, but in a sneaky, symbolic way. "The way he laughed at me," Eddie said, shaking his head like he could still hear it. Diddy turned to the whole room and said, "Look at this church boy, thinking Faith's gonna get him a blockbuster movie." The room burst into laughter, fake, nervous laughter, but it was enough to sting. "I wasn't embarrassed," Eddie said. "I was grossed out. I realized that party wasn't about who was loyal. It was about finding out who was desperate enough to do anything." Eddie told the court that after he walked out that night, he knew things were gonna change. "I didn't just leave a party," he said. "I walked out of Hollywood's secret world, the one behind the velvet rope where people trade favors for silence and humiliation is like money." Over the next few months, everything started falling apart. Projects he was set to star in got canceled out of nowhere. Roles written just for him went to other actors. His agent, who'd been with him for 7 years, stopped answering his calls. One producer who used to rave about Eddie's work told someone, "He's not aligned anymore." Eddie looked straight ahead, his voice steady but heavy. Aligned with what, exactly? He kept asking himself. Aligned with Diddy, with monkey brains and candlelit rituals? He wasn't angry when he said it, just calm, but you could feel the sadness underneath. "They didn't need to fire me or cancel me," he said. "They just stopped calling." That's how the real blacklist works. Not with a big bang, just silence. Eddie said he tried to keep going. He wrote new scripts, pitched fresh ideas, even did some voiceover work, but it felt like hitting a brick wall he couldn't see. "People smiled in meetings, said all the right things, but nothing happened," he said. "It's like I was floating just outside the gates of Hollywood, close but never getting in." He wrapped up this part with a line that hit the courtroom hard. "You don't have to sell your soul in Hollywood, but if you don't, they'll make everyone believe you never had one to begin with." When the lawyer asked if he thought he was blacklisted, Eddie didn't even pause. "Yes," he said, "but not in some big dramatic way like in the movies. It's quiet, precise, sneaky. That's how the system does it." He explained there's no official memo that says, "Ban this guy." It's just little dinners, quiet phone calls, meetings behind frosted glass where someone whispers, "He's a problem now." After that party, Eddie's name became like poison in the rooms he used to own. One One big executive even told a friend that Eddie didn't pass the test. When the friend asked what that meant, the exec just said he said no when he was supposed to say yes. Eddie took a deep breath, his eyes steady. That was all it took. One no. And the doors don't just close, they stop opening altogether. He said his team started shrinking fast. Producers who once called him a guaranteed box office hit started keeping their distance. Studios that used to beg him for meetings suddenly said they had no budget or were going in a different direction. I watched my work disappear in slow motion, he said. I'd send out pitches. No answer. I'd meet with networks. They'd nod and smile through the whole thing, then ghost me completely. He added, you start to doubt yourself. You think, maybe it's just bad timing. Maybe the market's tough. But then you hear the whispers, the things they say about you behind closed doors. The lawyer showed some emails from a studio boss where Eddie's name was listed next to the words, not a line, pass. The judge let those emails be shown to everyone. Eddie leaned toward the mic, his voice clear. I want the court to get this. Hollywood's blacklist doesn't wear a name tag. It smiles at you, shakes your hand, and erases you while you're still in the room. Eddie said refusing to play along at that party and walking out made him look difficult, ungrateful, like he didn't want to be a team player. I was labeled, he said, not because I hurt anyone, but because I wouldn't let them hurt me. Then he dug deeper, hitting a nerve. There are people whose careers vanish because they said no to those same parties, saw the same stuff I saw, and refused to go along. We act like it's just bad luck. It's not. Eddie said Hollywood doesn't just make movies. It makes myths, stories about who's good and who's not. The biggest myth? That success comes from talent. Wrong. It's about doing what you're told, following the rules they set. Then Eddie dropped the biggest bombshell yet, making everyone in the courtroom gasp, and Diddy's lawyers jump up to ask for a quick break. There's a list, Eddie said, his voice steady. It's not written down anywhere, but everyone in Hollywood knows it exists. It's the people you can't criticize, can't question, or you're out. The judge warned him not to make stuff up, but Eddie nodded and said, I'm not making this up, Your Honor. I lived it. He went on, Diddy's on that list. Tyler Perry's on it. Oprah Winfrey? She helped create it. The jury shifted in their seats. Reporters typed like crazy. Eddie explained this list isn't a piece of paper. It's an invisible line you don't cross, enforced with scary precision. If you speak against someone on that list, your name gets whispered in rooms as trouble, he said. That's how Diddy stayed untouchable for so long. Not just his money or lawyers, but fear. Fear of what happens if you say his name in a bad way. Eddie said even people who never went to those parties protected Diddy because their careers were built on his help. Tyler Perry knew what was up, Eddie said. So did others. They didn't have to join the creepy stuff. They just had to look the other way, pretend it wasn't happening. The lawyer asked if Eddie ever talked to anyone about this list. He nodded. A fellow actor, a close friend back then, told me, you're crossing the line, man. They don't bring back people who cross it. Eddie didn't name the friend, but hinted they were super tight once. We haven't talked since, he said. That's what happens when you speak the truth. You lose your circle, your people. The judge let Eddie show a bunch of emails, text messages, and call logs that proved how things changed after that party. They don't tell you they're cutting you off, Eddie said. Your name just goes from, we need him, to not now, and you're left wondering what happened. Then he said the most shocking thing of the day. You think Diddy blacklisted people by himself? No way. He had help, protection, a whole network keeping things quiet. He looked right at the jury. This isn't just about what went down in that house. It's about how many people stayed silent, paid to make it disappear, built huge careers while others got erased. Eddie got quieter now, and the courtroom leaned in even closer as his tone shifted. The lawyer asked how all this hit him personally. Eddie stared ahead for a long moment, then said, it broke me. Not all at once, but little by little, like a slow leak. A career doesn't vanish overnight. It just dissolves piece by piece. He admitted he didn't tell even his closest friends what happened. Nobody would have believed me, he said. And if they did, they'd be the next ones in trouble. He talked about long, dark days where he didn't leave his house, just sat in the same chair, replaying that night over and over. Not because of what happened to him, but because of what he saw others go through. The fear in their eyes, the fake smiles, the people who thought they had no choice. It stuck with me, he said. Eddie said his family became his rock. My kids saved me, he said, his voice softening. I'd hear them laughing in another room, and it pulled me back to what was real, what mattered most. He also turned to faith, not as a show for the cameras, but as something to hold on to. I stopped asking God why this happened, he said. I started asking when would I speak up? When would the world listen? When would truth matter more than money? The courtroom was so still you could hear a pin drop. Eddie said he got therapy and talked to a spiritual counselor counselor to deal with the guilt of walking away while others stayed in that house. I kept wondering, should I have done more? Should I have grabbed someone and pulled them out with me? He paused, looked at Diddy, and said, but I know now the most dangerous thing I could have done was stay silent, and I stayed silent way too long. The lawyer asked why he never wrote a book or did a big TV interview about it. Eddie gave a bitter smile. Because the people who own the microphones are the same ones who own the secrets, he said. He ended this part on a real human note. I lost the spotlight, yeah, but I found my peace. And honestly, that was the first real role I ever played. A man finally free from all the lies. The lawyer leaned in and asked, Mr. Murphy, why are you speaking out now, after all these years? Eddie let out a big breath, and the question hung there like a cloud. Because the walls are finally falling, he said. For the first time, I'm not the only one talking, and people are actually listening. He said when Cassie Ventura got on the stand, her voice shaking as she told her story of the awful things she went through. It hit him like a punch. Then Monique testified, bringing receipts, transcripts, proof, and years of pain all wrapped up in her calm, strong voice. Then an old recording of Prince surfaced, a guy who's been gone a long time, warning about stuff nobody wanted to hear when he was alive. I realized I couldn't sit this one out, Eddie said. Not again, not while the truth is still raw. He said fear held him back before. Not just fear of losing jobs, but fear of people twisting his words or coming after him. I saw what happened to folks who spoke out, he said. They weren't just canceled, they were erased, like they never existed. But the trial changed everything, he said. It's like dominoes falling one by one, he told the jury. And I'd rather be the next domino to fall for the truth than sit back protecting a lie. He said his kids are older now, and they started asking why he stopped acting. I couldn't look them in the eye and say I was just tired, he said. That would have been a lie. I stopped because I wasn't willing to lose who I am just to keep a career. He looked at the jury, his eyes steady. I'm not here to tear Diddy down, he said. I'm here so nobody else has to be built up by him ever again. The judge called for a short break, and as Eddie stood up, tons of people in the courtroom stood too. Not because it was a rule, but because they respected him, like they felt what he was saying deep down. When court started again, the air felt heavier, like everyone was more focused, knowing something big had just happened. Eddie's time on the stand was almost done, but nobody could have guessed how he'd wrap it up. The lawyer asked one final question. Mr. Murphy, what's the most important thing the jury and everyone out there should take from what you said today? Eddie took a long pause, like he was gathering every bit of strength, then leaned into the mic. Hollywood doesn't run on talent. It runs on doing what you're told, he said. The room was so quiet it felt like time stopped. Eddie went on. It rewards people who obey, not people with heart. What happened at Diddy's parties wasn't some random mess. It was a system, a secret machine built on fear, favors, and keeping your mouth shut. He said, I saw good people turn into puppets, doing whatever they were told. I saw grown men eat monkey brains just to get a movie role, and the ones laughing the loudest, they were the ones pulling all the strings behind the scenes. He stared right at Diddy's table, his eyes locked in. This man didn't build an empire. He built a trap, and too many of us walked right into it, thinking we were climbing to the top. He turned back to the jury. I could have spoken up sooner. I should have, but I'm speaking now because what's been hidden in the dark is finally coming into the light, and you're the first ones to see it clearly, without looking away. Then he said the line that spread like wildfire before court even ended. Don't protect the pretty lie. Let the truth be ugly. Let it show. Eddie stood up, the judge thanked him, and the courtroom stayed silent, like everyone was holding their breath. Diddy, who looked totally shaken for the first time, didn't say a word. Eddie Murphy, the guy who used to be the biggest comedy star in the world, had just given the most serious gut-punching testimony of his life, and it might have changed everything.